Okay, so let's start with intros because this panel is stacked and I want to hear all about you all. So,
Hey everybody, go SheFi. My name is Sydney Lai and I am one of the co-founders as well as head of developer relations at Gaio.
Hey, I'm Liz. I'm a partner at A16Z Crypto.
Hi, I'm Ria. I'm head of marketing at LifePure.
and I'm Tina. I am product lead at Hyperbolic Labs, which is an inference and GPU marketplace. So I'm super excited about this panel because I think there's a very broad spectrum consumer-facing applications and both excitement about AI and crypto and also institutional excitement. And a lot of people, specifically I would say my sister and family, don't understand any of it. And what we want to kind of break down in this panel is a lot of that context and kind of discuss why people are excited about it. So kind of the first question I'll go into is what do you foresee is kind of the future of AI and crypto and why you're both excited about it in your role and then for the future of maybe say consumer adoption or the ecosystem?
Yeah, I can kind of get started there. I think one of the things I'm most excited about in this intersection is the idea of agents and why and how agents can interact on chain. I think a lot of the things that make crypto really hard for consumers make it really great for computers and for bots and agents to use. And so I'm pretty excited about as we see more and more agents populate the internet, using crypto as a means to kind of orchestrate how those agents interact. What are the rules of the road? What do you do when two agents run into each other? I think, code is law is a very complicated concept for humans, but a very easy concept for agents and for bots. And so I'm excited to see that kind of play out and see how we can use crypto as an orchestration and also a way to keep control of and create rules for agents as they run free on the internet.
That's a really big topic. I think to provide context, we first look at why AI even began in the first place. And so the working thesis about why are we pursuing AI as humanity is that we're trying to get towards AGI or artificial general intelligence, the concept that AI can perform like humans, but better, smarter, faster. And I think one of the differentiators that you talked about is in why Web3 and AI. And the concept there is that, to what you were saying, Liz, earlier, is that we want to automate self-run tasks. So most of Web3 wants to understand how do we use specific tasks to be orchestrated. And at this current rate, we are doing so in using smart contracts, which is like, hey, how do we have an agentic framework? And then how do we settle those specific decisions when certain conditions are met? And I think that it's going to probably require something that is more of a hybrid-based approach, which would not be more of a definitive settlement. I'm happy to talk more about that as well.
I would plus on all of that stuff. And then I would also add a piece of governance. I think AI struggles with this black box of decision making. I think blockchain could really help with that. And then on the other hand, AI has that mass adoption, also a negative brand in some cases. I think the two together could bring mass adoption to blockchain as well.
Okay, amazing. I love just hearing from smart women because breadth of knowledge. And I love, Sydney, you mentioned automation workflows. I think, Liz, you mentioned trustless execution environments. And then you also, Ria, mentioned developer adoption and governance automation. Could you guys take an existing on-chain workflow or off-chain workflow or a use case that you think of that AI specifically enhances or revolutionizes? Because I think one thing a lot of people in existing Web3 spaces kind of struggle with is visualizing the actual improvements and what they'll be.
I'm very heated about this topic.
I know.
I'm like, my heart is racing. Thank you for laughing because it's real. So when we're talking about how do we actually see this in a real world use case, y'all, a hackathon. We had a hackathon recently and the manual process of slacking the colleague, like, hey, sorry, can you put 20K in the Gnosis safe? No, you didn't respond? Okay, let me just send you a calendar invite. You didn't come to the calendar invite. Okay, so then I have to go to Telegram, like, sorry guys, the money's coming, I'm so sorry, right? So this is still extremely manual, which is like just simply paying out bounties for a hackathon. And so then it's like, how do we actually automate these self-run tasks? So again, as I was saying earlier, I think AI is interested in AGI. I think at least here in Web3 at this current state, we are interested in automating certain self-run tasks. And the last thing I'll say, and this is because you talked about this earlier about governance, is that right now governance is still pretty manual, right? Still pretty manual. And what that means is that governance data sets are still socially swayed. So what we've done, for example, is we have data sets across, like, let's say 350 DAOs. We can see these delegates of so-and-so L2 DAO, they always vote the same way. These last 3 delegates, they're always voting based off consensus. They don't have their own opinion, right? So then the question is, how do you actually create automated orchestration so that you can make decisions beyond just manual, like current manual programming, which is how logic is currently being created.
Yeah, I think talking about these real use cases, you kind of have to break it down into 2 different sectors. So you have how can AI help crypto, and you have how can crypto help AI. And so in the AI helping crypto world, I think this is a little bit of what you're talking about right now, but also simple things as easy as how can we help developer adoption? How can we use tools like Cursor, but to help with specifically smart contract auditing or other kind of like Web3 specific use cases? How can we lower friction? How can we make the consumer interfaces better? How can we make UX better? That kind of all falls into the how can we use AI to help crypto? I think on the other side of how can we tangibly use crypto to help AI, there's a number of really interesting kind of spaces that are being explored. I think looking at things like authenticity, provenance, how can we kind of track down fake news? How can we track down fake images? That's like one big area that's being explored. How can you use blockchain very simply as a transparent and immutable ledger to kind of do that provenance? I think the other one that's really interesting is going back to what I was talking about with agents and payments. And so I think, we saw a very good example of this on Twitter with, Truth Terminal spinning up a wallet and being able to get invested in and then launching meme coins and all that craziness. And I think a lot of that is, fun, toy, hype world. But I think it is indicative of a larger example of if we're going to have agents running free on the internet performing these automated tasks, they're going to need to have wallets. They're going to be able to pay for things. They're going to be able to transact. And I think that is a very tangible thing that's happening right now where crypto is really helping AI.
I used to work at a traditional bank, TradFi, and we always talked about what was the most largest unbanked population. Agents will be the most unbanked population coming up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I 100% agree with that. I think you'll hear that a lot. 100% agree with everything. I think we need to reframe it as Liz is saying. It's not just like what AI can do to help us. It's like what can we do to solve real world problems? And I think there is a lot of scope in healthcare, cybersecurity, at Life Here, not to shill, but essentially we are onboarding AI video developers, right? And that is a big market. It's already a proven use case. So we have to meet the developers where they are and meet people where they are without shoving that like blockchain narrative.
I have so much more to say.
No, go.
Is it possible?
This is good.
We're in for a ride.
Also, like, just to define agents, because I think that's a buzzword that not a lot of people know, that can be anything from a Twitter bot running autonomously to an on-chain bot running autonomously to a Twitter API that you configure to run autonomously. So anything that is running autonomously.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, I just kind of, the way I think about it is a piece of code that executes an action on your behalf. And it can be as simple as like a limit order. It can be as complicated as a Twitter bot that's tweeting for itself and spinning up wallets and anything in between that. But generally, when code is autonomously executing actions on your behalf.
In Web3 terms, it is a dApp with AI capabilities.
Yeah.
I think you talked about, the proven market for live peer video. I think another thing to understand is to like that chasm between AGI and currently self-run tasks for these AI agents. Like we're really harping on this, right? And why? Because at this current rate of how AI is being developed, the core fundamental is that it still relies on multimodal integration. So this multimodal integration, what that means is the ability to contextualize and generate across text, images, video, audio, but also be able to generate and process the cultural context and nuance behind these images and these videos. And then so what that means then is then having to figure out a way to be able to handle abstract logic and abstract planning. And so we're not quite there yet. And I think where we're starting right now is with these agentic self-run task completion.
Okay, I love that you brought up AGI because that goes into my next question. But a lot of the traditional AI world right now is kind of going into this deeper discussion about ethics and the ethics involved with AGI. And that same conversation as a result of automation and AI coming into crypto is also arising now as well. And I want to know what you guys specifically think about the ethics of building this infrastructure in crypto and what that impact would potentially be.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think one of the great things about Web3 is that it's incredibly deterministic. And so I really like the idea that you can use Web3 or blockchains to put guardrails on AI in the way that AI is incredibly non-deterministic for the most part. And you can kind of let it run free, and that's what people are afraid of. You can do the exact opposite in crypto. And so I like this idea of putting guardrails on what an AI may or may not be able to do using cryptography or a blockchain. But more generally, I think that building with Web3 ethos is the safest way to build AGI. Having everything be open source, having it be transparent, having everyone be able to have a say in it, not being behind these walled gardens, not being hidden. I think we haven't seen a ton of as much interaction as we would like with something like a DAO and voting, but something that people clearly care a lot about is how are we censoring or not censoring these AIs? How is, Gemini or any of these models being trained or have prejudice put in or taken out or bias? And I think that's an area where it might make a lot of sense to have a DAO and let people vote on what should or shouldn't be allowed and what should or shouldn't be said. And so I think that whether or not we're actually literally building on chain with AGI, building in and around that ethos, I think is probably the safest way to go about it. But I know a lot of people disagree, so.
I was actually just going to say, I personally would disagree only because, well, one, there's various schools of thought to getting to AGI. There's various schools of thought. And I think right now, the deterministic thought you were talking about is in Web3, we're seeing leading ZKML solutions to creating this type of governance settlements. As we already know, everyone knows that smart contracts are great because it settles everything definitively, right? I personally am not sure if that kind of what I said earlier is enough to be able to contextualize the multimodal integration, which is you need to be able to contextualize images, text, videos, etc. And so this actually keeps me up at night. I recently had a conversation with Vitalik to double check the working thesis that our team was having, which is how do we build something maybe more of a hybrid contract model? I'm not exactly sure what that would look like, right? And we're willing to spend the time to find that out. And I think that from his perspective, that AGI at one point, and this is kind of like beyond Web3, will kind of bypass all that we're trying to do right now, which is the smart contract solution. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree that it's not a given or even, I think, particularly necessary to literally put the AGI on chain. I think it's more how can we use these kind of as a method of orchestration between whatever is running on your computer, whatever is running on my computer, how I want to interact with the internet, how you want to interact with the internet, more so than literally an entire model put on Ethereum.
I have nothing to add here. I was going to say I agree with Liz, but then you explained it. I'm like, say more.
Tell me more.
Okay, so one thing Sydney went into is a library called CKML. It's an incredible library, I think coined by some of the WorldCoin contributors, and there's a number of other Web3 contributors, but it primarily does research on on-chain verification and on-chain model fine-tuning, as well as on-chain use of models in Ethereum. And right now, the confirmation time for using CKML and OPML, the two ML or machine learning based frameworks in Ethereum, typically are 11 to 15 minutes. Last time I checked, might be wrong. But how do you guys feel about the fact that a lot of the on-chain verification and model development is not at the place yet to build a lot of this long-term infrastructure, and what you foresee with the current development and how it affects it?
I'll just jump in.
Sorry,
Okay,
giving you a hard one.
there's several things to tackle. Ladies, ADHD, I don't even know where to begin. Okay, so we could talk about the ZKML, we could talk about scaling, right? Those are kind of like almost two different questions. So the ZKML side is essentially the concept of using machine learning and then adding a security layer. Again, if we're using like a comparison apples to apples kind of we can look at it how AWS is tackling it. And so from AWS, how they tackle ZK is the example of, let's say, automated reasoning. So this type of reasoning is like a cat has hair, Fluffy is a cat, and then therefore Fluffy has hair or fur. Excuse me, I'm sorry, fur, right? So like that type of reasoning, and then adding that type of reasoning and securitizing of an ML model, for example. And then now we're talking about, okay, that's one piece. And then the last thing I'll say about that is that it's still very deterministic, what we talked about earlier, which is it's kind of hard to have something deterministic, but then does cat actually have fur? Or is it one of those bald cats, right? So we don't know, right? So there's that one piece. And then the second piece is then the scale, the time that we were talking about. And so that's something that we're currently addressing right now. So in the last 3 weeks, we have been working with Eigenlayer, specifically here in Thailand, to figure out how do we scale this and how do we securitize this, right? And then we also found out that during this time, as we're building with MegaETH, like, hey, can MegaETH as its own, I don't want to call it L2, but like, how can you actually settle that even faster and bring it down right? So I'm not here just to name drop. I'm just here to give an example of what we're tangibly looking at to kind of address this 15-minute gap.
Can I ask a follow-up question for the audience? So when you reference Mega ETH and Eigenlayer, are you trying to collaborate with them because they have a larger sequencer, so the kilobyte and transaction size is larger for these model requests?
That's a really good question. I think it's for us, because for us specifically, so Gaia is a developer platform where it's open source and you can build apps on top of data sets. And the closest analogy is to Docker. We're 4 lines of code, and we are able to download and containerize your whole environment, so you don't have to like piecemeal everything. It's like, instead of grocery shopping for dinner, you just buy a meal kit, and then it's like, oh, it's here, and then you just build a meal. But I think the question with Eigenlayer specifically, and then MegaETH, is similar to our like mental framework. It's about being able to compartmentalize and package that so much more efficiently and effectively.
Yeah, I think maybe going back a little bit to your original question, I think it depends a lot on why we're using ZKML, right? Like, what are we trying to get out of this? Are we trying to run inference on chain? Do we need verifiable compute? Are we trying to, there's a number of different reasons that we might or might not want to use some sort of cryptography to verify some output from a model or some distilling of a model or training of a model, or there's like a number of different kind of pieces that you might want to verify, and all the way from a simple inference request and a tiny like XGBoost, or like a full training run of an LLM, like of the order of 10 billion parameters, right? And so depending on where in that spectrum you are, and then how high your security is or how high your need for security is, we have a wide variety of kind of like options on the menu and their ability to scale. And so if you're talking about like, I want, consensus level security to train, GPT-6, I think we're very, very far away from that. If you're talking about, I want some sort of like realistically optimistic security for inference because I'm using a decentralized compute platform because it's cheaper than going to AWS right now, I think you can probably lower your security threshold a little bit. And so it might be more feasible, or it is more feasible today. And so I think that naturally we'll see these things scale, but a question that I bring up a lot is like, what is our goal here, right? Like, what is the goal with putting this on chain, or what is the goal with getting verifiable inference here? And how does that change the approach, and how does it change how realistic it is? I think we're a very long way off, like I said, from seeing a ChatGPT-like product on chain, but I don't think we're that far off from seeing a much more kind of reasonable use case for AI.
I would agree with that. It's like from a tactical perspective, there's like use cases that we can just go into, but if we are going longer term, longer vision, I don't know, years.
Okay, and my next question is more so about adoption. So I think one thing crypto and Web3 has struggled with is long-term sustainable adoption. There's been DSL languages that are distributed systems languages that are built on cryptography that are trying to get developer adoption. There's been all VMs that are also building out languages or ecosystems and trying to get adoption. How do you foresee the both AI infrastructure and the AI research that's building out right now in our community being sustainably maintained, and how do you see developer adoption kind of maintained long term?
So sorry, the question is like, how do we bring more people
Yeah, with competing ecosystems and products that have also struggled to have developer adoption, how do you think that a crypto and AI can specifically have that interest or sustain it?
Do you want to go first, Sid? From a DevRel perspective?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Head of DevRel. That's right. Developer adoption. So I think without a doubt, the ease of AI adoption is the UX. It's a chat. You just type it in the chat, right? And then of course we look at Web3. It's a picture. You just pay $20,000 for it. So when we look at the different UX experience, may it be an NFT or if it's a chatbot, it does require several levels of abstraction, right? Lots and lots of abstraction. It's just a chatbot. It's just a JPEG. Pay for it. Now, then we look at developer adoption. I think that developer adoption, I'm guilty of this. I'm sure those who you're like, I have a problem, I'm gonna make a solution, and you just over-engineer it. You just over-engineer it. It's like you're trying to make the fanciest dinner, and you're like, girl, just put noodles and some water, like go to bed, right? So we tend to over-engineer things, or we don't want to, but we've like as developers, we're like, oh, we're too smart. We can figure this out. So I think that when it comes to how do you break the chasm of adoption, is you really need to understand who do you need to adopt. And as of right now, I think Web3 AI is limited to what's validated in the current economic market. And that is, let's say, delivering a product for developers. And so therefore, that means that teams might have one or less UX designers on their team, right? So I think that we are in this industry currently, a developer or information-led first go-to-market versus like a product UX go-to-market.
Yeah, I would say, okay, I'll go first. I think it's about creating value before you're asking for value and meeting the developers where they are. Tons of education is required for both AI and blockchain. And then beyond that, it's, I've seen this happen in GameFi narrative too, right? Like I said this earlier, we're saying like blockchain, 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 and it turns people off. I think we need to move away from that and like, this is the problem that we're solving. This is just the underlying technology to solve it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think what I was going to say is finding a developer that is both like an expert Solidity engineer and also can build models is maybe not impossible, but very, very tricky. And so building a product that asks your developers to know both is going to really struggle, is going to be a very hard time for you. And so understanding whether your main kind of like target developer is a crypto engineer and you're going to abstract away the AI, is an AI engineer and you're going to abstract away the crypto, or maybe it's not a developer and then this is a different conversation. But I think where companies get into trouble is when they're trying to target developers that both need to deeply understand AI and crypto, because the Venn diagram is just so small and those people are probably already getting paid a lot of money to work at a different company. And so at least one needs to be abstracted away.
You cannot be everything to everyone.
Yeah.
With free marketing.
Put that, someone please tweet that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that this specific example really hits home because I think as a developer framework, again, 4 lines of code. So we basically abstract the need for you as a developer to need to know either Web3 or AI. You're just a developer and you need to build some sort of decentralized AI. So that's something that's close to us. Yeah.
Okay, for last question, I will just give maybe you all touched on maybe safety aspects of AI. And I think Sydney touched on Coinbase SDK. And one of you also mentioned verification of personhood. I mostly just wanted to wrap it up and kind of go into what you guys think about guardrails and safety of these tools and infrastructure that we're building, and how both the women in here that would potentially be impacted by it can be mindful of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you just brought up is a really great example of what we were talking about earlier of how, crypto can be the guardrails in AI. So we've talked a lot about, agents and how great they're going to be, and you're all going to have these agents deployed for you doing a million tasks that you don't want to do, and it's going to be amazing. But also, that turns into an internet run by bots. And so I think that what crypto can do to help is this verification of personhood that you were referencing. And so, if we can have a kind of differentiation such that humans can remain first-class citizens on the internet, even while you have an army of bots doing all the things that we want our army of bots to do that we don't want to bother with, that's going to create a huge kind of differentiation and allow for safety on the internet while still allowing AI to do what AI is good for. And I think that what we've seen is really the only way to do that is through crypto, to have really strong verification of personhood and one-to-one, I am myself, I hold an NFT that is me. versus a bot. And even if I want to delegate that person into a bot, at most I can do is one-to-one.
Yeah, and also that's the huge differentiator is that if you assign an ID to an AI agent, that differentiates the agent from a bot.
+1.
Okay, thank you so much, guys. Everyone give a round of applause for the lovely panelists. Amazing.